Welcome back. We're back. Episode 4, Two Fans, One Paul. Myself, David Quist, and newly married KB Kirk Brown. How we doing, bud? How we feeling?
We're feeling good. Enjoying the married life for 3 days now, 3 full days, and it's good to be back in Michigan. Although it was a little hot, but excited to get back into the routine of the podcast here. So
Yes. Let the grind begin. We're gonna have a little hot take session, a little bit, probably 5 minutes or so. We're gonna have a little slight recap of Week 0, nothing crazy. Talk a little bit about state, not much, and then maybe 2 minutes on Jim Harbaugh being banned or his self and the university suspended him for three games. But we'll jump right in. Week 0, not much going on. Notre Dame dominated Navy. Sam Hartman's a dude. He's my quarterback of my fantasy team, so I guess we'll see. Kind of feel bad for Navy traveling all the way across the pond, but would be cool to go to one of those games.
yeah, it would be cool. Yeah, Sam Hartman looked good. He looked poised in the pocket. They ran the ball pretty effectively, but we don't know how good Navy is, so it should be interesting to see the matchup against another Week 0 opponent that USC played this week. Um, they their offense looked dominant. I can't think of the true freshman's name. Do you remember what it was? He was absolutely electric.
Is it a
He's gonna be
receiver?
yeah.
I'm not too sure.
I
He
can't
might be
think
on
of
my
it.
fantasy team. Did he play?
Yeah, I just looked it up. He had a kick return for a touchdown. He had like 86 receiving yards. He was really, really impressive as a true freshman. But their defense still looked a little suspect. Didn't stop the run well. QB ran a lot on them. They obviously dominated their offense as world class under Riley, but it'll be interesting to see how that kind of pans out. Notre Dame and USC playing the 18th of October. So
Yeah.
excited for that game. But week 0, I wish that someone would just say, like, hey, let's make that official start week and just give every team 2 buys so that way it would be more entertaining because it literally kicks off with no ranked matchups, nothing really fun going on, not even an in conference game that means anything. It's a lot of just cupcakes and
Yeah.
blowouts, and then
Agree.
teams get an extra buy. So, but
We do have a
it
nice little
should be
juicy game
interesting.
Thursday, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Florida Utah should be fun. Um, so week 0 was fine. I don't think that guy's on my team, but I got Hartman on my fantasy team, so hopefully, fingers crossed. Yes, I do college fantasy. I'm a psychopath. Um, Little news on state, not much. Tucker's usually hush hush with the media per usual, but it sounds like there's a starting guy. My bet is Kim starts the game, but Hauser gets some action. I have a hot take about it later when it comes to the QB stuff. Nothing too crazy. Looking forward to Friday. A nice little hang out with my kid, a little golf, and then a little peanut barrel, and then a tailgate, and then a nice game on a Friday night. So looking forward to that. And then I just wanted to see what you think about the three-game ban that Michigan put on Harbaugh.
Yeah, so they also announced I'm gonna address that in a second, but they also announced a 1 game ban on Sharon Moore, Michigan's new OC and lineman, because it sounds like he knew about the accusations. And the NCAA accepted that one, but they did not accept the Jim Harbaugh ban, so we could expect more games in 2024,
Hmm.
and that's big because they play Texas early. Um, I think the point of it was Michigan's saying like, "Hey, we know we did something wrong. We know that something transpired, but is that really what we're focused on, NCAA? Like, there's so much stuff going on, and it's like this is what we're worried about. I mean, there's a few
I mean,
workouts, small things, and there's really the lying, and I
yeah.
get the impose it, but it's just kind of crazy what's happening. I'm excited to see what's happening because Michigan's doing something pretty darn interesting.
The coaching stuff?
So, yeah, so the
Yeah, I
coaching
saw it.
stuff. So in his wake, Ben Herbert and his actually Jim Harbaugh's father Jack have been named the associate head coaches, and then so they'll handle a lot of stuff, maybe field some media stuff, and then he's named his coordinators to split of the 3 games. So because Sharon Moore is suspended the first game, um, Minter, yeah, is going to be the head coach for the first game. Then Jay Harbaugh, his son, and running backs coach. Oh my God, Mike Hart
Mike
are
Hart.
going to split
I
game
knew
two.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then game 3, we're going to be seeing Sharon Moore be the head coach of all those games. He said he's like, people are asked, why didn't you name an interim in your time so you can have some stability? And he basically said like, hey, all these guys deserve chances. They'll be head coaches soon. let's showcase their abilities to the national stage, which I thought was cool. But it sucks that Jim Harbaugh is going to be out, obviously.
Doesn't
But one of the
matter.
good
Doesn't matter.
things, well, one of the good things is he can still be at practice. So
Right.
with the whole entire thing falling down between the NCAA and him, is he was going to have to miss all the practices in between those games for 3 weeks. And
That would
now
be
it's
a big
saying,
deal.
hey,
That would be a
we
bigger
still
deal.
do 3 games. I mean, if they suspend him another 3 games next year, the NCAA that could run in a Texas game, but maybe a 1 game suspension is like, hey, you suggested 4, we already did 3. How about 1? So it'll be interesting. Obviously, it's a dog and pony show, which it always is. But I'm not really too concerned with who they're playing, and I just hope the team comes out focused and ready to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the coaching stuff, I saw that on Twitter. I was like, that's pretty cool, or X. It is different and cool. I think the whole thing is just him not owning up to it. I think if he would have just said, yeah, I did this during COVID, they might have done a fine or something less. I could
Yeah.
be wrong, but I think that's the
No,
whole
that,
thing.
that's what I've heard too. And so, I mean, we don't know the details. The NCAA has been breaking their own like non-disclosure agreement to drop details about the case, which kind of goes to show they're losing the PR battle, at least amongst Michigan fans, most likely. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that all unfolds down the stretch
Yeah.
into next year if he leaves to the NFL or whatever the rumors are. And maybe that influences his decision with his like, hey, I'm suspended 3 games. Screw this, I'm leaving. But
Yeah, big money in. I mean, I heard some stuff about State a while back that just kind of came to fruition in my friend group. We can always talk about it another time. I don't want to
yeah,
get anybody in trouble, but people can keep things hush hush, no problem, which is crazy.
absolutely. So that's all we kind of wanted to cover, correct?
Yep,
We want to
that's
jump
it.
into our hot takes.
Jump into
So
hot takes. Probably just
our,
go
our
back and forth, and then we can always have a conversation in between. You can lead it off.
yeah. So I'm just gonna kind of describe what we're doing. It's not to say like these are gonna be 100% gonna be happening, right? It's a hot take. It's something that's a little off the wall, a little maybe more interesting, just to start a talking point. And we're gonna do. I'm doing one thing about U of M, one thing about MSU, from an outsider, and then we're gonna do a Big Ten as a whole, and then two other Power Five conferences. And then I think Dave, you said you're doing 2 MSU, one Michigan, and then just the same as me on the other
Pretty much.
conferences and
My Big
within the
Ten,
Big Ten.
Michigan one's all kind of in one.
Perfect. All right, so my first one for Michigan is JJ is going to break the single season passing yards and passing touchdown record this year. So, looking at the record, it's 3,331 yards for passing yards,
Chad
and
Henne?
it's no, it was it's I can't think of his
Shea
name.
Patterson?
It's Navarre, maybe.
No
I
way,
can.
really? That's a long time
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. It's like it hasn't been broken in a really. I
How
can double
many
check.
touchdown passes is that record
It's
for
only
Michigan?
25.
Oh my
So
gosh.
JJ almost broke it last year. He had 22, which is
That's
why I'm
nothing.
pretty high in him um, breaking it this year.
Wow, when was it not? Was he like early 2000s? Was that
Well,
at the
Denard
at
never really passed for a lot of I mean, he had a lot of yeah, John Navarre from 2003.
was okay.
So
Okay.
back in the day. So if JJ plays 13 games this year, not including a Big Ten championship bid possibility, he has to throw for 256 yards a game. Definitely in the
It's nothing.
wheelhouse. Sounds like they're gonna lighten it up. It's not a big ask, and he could have broken the record last year for passing touchdowns if Michigan would have ever refused to do anything other than run the ball on third down, second, and one around the goal line. I mean, it's literally just throwing the ball
Throw
more
it to
into
Loveland
the end zone.
or your tight end
Yeah,
or
throw it into the end zone. That's one of the big things too. So I think that's going to be a new goal with how much their offense struggled in the red zone, both in the postseason and at times against like Illinois, Michigan State, and stuff like that. So that's my hot take. It's not super hot, but 2 single season passing records as a true junior is, I mean, a little bit of a hot take.
Yeah, my hot first take is probably kind of lukewarm, but for State, I think Hauser's a starter at Washington game as a redshirt freshman. Obviously, he's in the competition with Kim, but Kim's the older guy, and he kind of seems like he's probably higher with the coaches. But I think they're gonna split snaps the first 2 games against Central and Richmond, and then, in my opinion, you got to know who the guy is, and you're gonna have to commit to him. And to me, that's Hauser. Like I talked about the last podcast. Going with a younger guy at State has worked out. That's Connor Cook, and that's also Kirk Cousins. There might be another battle in there that I'm missing, but going with a younger quarterback has paid off for us. And Hauser was a big deal. He was really good in the Elite 11. I mean, I think Noah Kim was probably a good leader, athletic, but he's just a little too skinny. I don't think Hauser on the roster, it says he's 215. I doubt it. He's probably like 6'3", 200, 205. But I think he's the better overall talent, and he could show out against Washington, just doesn't make any mistakes, and we win a game, a big game at home against a big team. So that's my first out take. I think Hauser could be the guy to lead us to a winning season.
So Kim is technically the announced starter, right? For
They
the
haven't
first
announced
game?
anything. Like I said,
Okay.
I think Tucker is like, you'll see who comes out
And,
first
and
play.
if no one's won the starting job and you're the upperclassman, I mean that goes to show that they do have some confidence in the younger
Highly
quarterback at least.
recruited, out
Yeah.
of Cali,
Okay.
St. John Bosco, power. That's a powerhouse school. If you know anything, I mean, I know a little bit about high school football, so I know that name. Um, he's got the size. He's an athlete. And if you don't start him, he's probably going to transfer. So, in my opinion, you start him. And if he loses the job, he loses the job. But that's just my opinion. But I also think he's got the higher upside throughout the year and as we go on the next few years.
All right, perfect. So this is my second hot take. I think that one of these two or both of the D coordinator and offensive coordinator are going to be fired after the U of M game.
Ooh, that's spicy.
So, yeah, this is for MSU's
Yeah.
defensive and offensive coordinator. Um, I think that State most likely will lose the Washington game. They could lose another toss up in there, maybe
Maryland,
their
Iowa.
Iowa, yeah,
Those are tough
and
games.
then they could have three or four losses, and they lose to Michigan, and maybe it's a blowout. Maybe their offense can't do anything, and it's like a 21-3, 21-7 game where their offense still hasn't figured it out, and these are the same old coordinators. And then that's when Mel Tucker kind of has to figure out, like, I'm more safe just because of my contract, but if I keep guys on that are failing me, then
They
it's
gotta go.
reflects on me, right? I'm the manager and I have a bunch of, my assistants failing, and that reflects on me. And I think one of those two, or maybe even both, depending on how the game looks or how serious or how bad the team is at that point, I think one of them is going to be gone because I don't think I think State has a chance to have a good record this year if they beat on the low level teams in the Big Ten. Maybe split one of the big three, beat Maryland. But if they're struggling at that point in the season and things aren't going their way and they haven't really figured out a quarterback, or, God forbid, one of those guys goes down with injury, or both of them, or one transfers and they go down with injury, and it's kind of this cesspool of mess. And or maybe your secondary lets up 300 passing yards to Iowa, and it's like, holy shit, what are we doing? And that might be one of the last stones where it's like, we have to start fixing this from the coaching staff.
Definitely a hot take. I don't think Tucker would ever fire a coordinator during the season, but if shit is hitting the fan, then you kind of have to because the fans are already talking about Scotty Hazelton. I think Jay Johnson might have a little more leeway just because I mean,
He
Kenneth Walker.
inherited Kenneth Walker for a year.
Yeah, yeah, Scotty Hazelton. I don't know if his scheme is any good. I don't know, but he's definitely more in the hot seat than Jay Johnson. And Tucker, if I've seen some other people say that Tucker's in the hot seat, but I think he won't be in the hot seat unless we have a shit season this year, which is no bowl game. But definitely hot, but I can see something happening or a change up happening if we're not performing. Um,
Yeah,
that's
or
why it's
maybe
a hot
like Mel
take.
Tucker takes over defensive coordinator duties from Hazelton if they don't want to fire him. Like something
Maybe.
like that, where it's like, but I don't envision growth. Like you would have seen growth. There's been no growth. They've been the same defensive unit for 3 seasons
Yeah,
under Mel Tucker,
it's gotta be.
where
It's
they
gotta be
can
better.
sometimes stop people within the 20s, but they let up huge chunk plays consistently. And it's like, well, we don't have the personnel. We don't have the personnel. Well, this is the year, right? You got all your guys. You're talking about them in camp. I mean, you have to show it. And if you don't, then it's you.
Agreed.
So,
Oh, that's a good take. That's a good hot take. Um, my Michigan one is kind of tied in with my Big Ten take. So, my second hot take for Michigan State is we will win 2 out of the 4 of Michigan, Ohio State, Washington, and Penn State. Um, I could have said 3, but I think 2 is good. I mean, that's still 2 big
well, we know
wins.
there's one loss. So, you could just say 2 for 3. on the
No,
other
I
end.
think we get 2 out of the 4. I'm not gonna put a name on who we're gonna beat. I think that's a dumb way to do a hot take, but we will win 2 out of the 4. Whoever it may be, I think if we beat Washington, that'll be big because if we lose to Washington, I can see us spiraling, especially having Maryland at home, which could be a sneaky good team. Um, but if we split 2 out of the 4, in my opinion, that means we're beating probably Washington and then one of the top three teams in the East. And if we end on a high note against Penn State or beat Michigan at home or Michigan at home,
Yeah.
yeah, that'd be not bonkers. Maybe some couches burning. Um,
Yeah.
but
That gets you to like an 8-4, 9-3 season too.
that's a good team. I think that shows. I was listening to a podcast with Brian Lewerke talking to one of the state guys about stuff, and he kind of felt like there was like the 2017 season where they were pretty good. I think they were second in the Big Ten East with him. We beat Michigan that year, 14-10. Shout out John O'Corn. But I
40
think,
pass attempts in a rainstorm.
yeah. But I think 2 out of 4 is a hot take given the way Vegas has us going 5-5. A lot of people have us going 6-6. I think if we split those 4 games, all those teams they won 10 plus games last year. I think that's a pretty hot take, and I think that'll just show that we're a pretty solid team this year. Whether it be maybe we go 7-5 with a couple games we shouldn't lose and a couple games we should win. I think that would be pretty exciting to see us beat 2 of those 4.
Yeah, no, that'll be super exciting, and that sets you up for success next year because it kind of seems so long ago that Michigan State won 11 games. Where they were had an opportunity, lost to Purdue somehow, didn't hand the ball to Kenneth Walker, and then entirety of the second half. It feels like that was so long ago, and that was only one full season. Is because last year was I mean, this is from a Michigan fan's perspective, but so miserable to
It was tough.
watch that team play football, play offense, do things in any shape and form, and they still won close games. They still figured out ways to win some games and lose some games, but
Wisconsin
um,
was a heart
yeah, it
attack.
was kind of like a cardiac arrest every single week,
Yeah.
and so it felt like forever ago. And maybe Tucker can figure it out, get the right pieces in, where like, hey, a letdown, and we're gonna be back rolling. It's often really tough for the third year a head coach is in his position to win because you've lost the last years. You're kind of like all your upperclassmen are going to be like freshmen you didn't recruit, so they probably leave, especially in transfer portal era
Hmm.
and that stuff. So I mean, I don't know how to judge state because most years they have no idea what they're doing. If they're low on them, they're great. If they're high on them, they're terrible. If they're middle of the road on them, they're like either the best team ever. Or I mean, no one ever really knows. Um, but it should be fun. And if they win 2 of those 4, I mean, that sets them up not to win the Big Ten necessarily, but it sets them up to get in a nice bowl game, reset themselves nationally after a bad
A
season
down
last
year.
year.
Disappointing.
Yeah. All right, perfect. So I'm going to go to my number 3 point, which is the Big Ten as a whole. And the Big Ten West is going to come down to Purdue and Illinois again. So last year, Purdue and
Wow.
Illinois were the two top
Hot
teams in the
take.
conference.
No Wisconsin,
Um,
no Iowa.
yeah, so
Sorry, finish your point.
No, 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 no. I agree it's a hot take. So I think the Wisconsin thing, I think people aren't letting on to how much of a change it's going to be transitioning to Fickle. So I think Fickle's a terrific football coach. And I mean, what he did at Cincinnati, what he's done at a lot of places, I mean, he's a good football coach. He knows how to coach. They're bringing in a new offensive coordinator, a new identity from North Carolina, and that coach does run the ball, but it's a completely different mindset of running the ball. It's a completely different philosophy of playing offense.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they also lost Leonard, the defensive coordinator for Wisconsin, that was thought to be the presumptive guy to take over the job for Wisconsin. He's been in the program for years. Players loved him. He kind of, I remember when it happened that Fickle was announced, that he basically said like, I feel like I've been blindsided by this kind of, and I wasn't let know because I think he was the interim at the time.
Yeah.
And that defense has been the backbone of that. I mean, we know the Big Ten West offenses are usually pretty bad, defenses are usually pretty good. And when you transition from that Wisconsin defensive culture, I think they're transitioning maybe to a 4-2-5. They might struggle this year. I mean, we know the guys in the trenches are good, but they just might not be where they're at. And Iowa, Cade McNamara is most likely injured. I saw an interview recently where he basically said, yeah, it's still rehabbing right now, which is never a good place where a player is saying it's rehabbing because most players are overconfident that they'll get out to play. and their offense has just been atrocious. Obviously, their defense can be, to the moon. But if you don't replace the problem, which is the offensive coordinator, who's gotten drastically worse, hasn't shown signs of improvement, and you give him, hey, just score 25 points. Oh, and also defensive touchdowns and special teams play count. Not like, hey, I want the offense to score this many points this year. It just goes to show that they have no confidence in that. It's just because his father's the head coach.
Yes.
But just to talk, I've talked not negatively on those two teams, but I really like what Purdue and Illinois can do. So Illinois' head coach is the former Illinois defensive
Bert.
coordinator. Yeah. What
Brett.
Purdue's head coach?
Oh, Purdue. Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about
Purdue's head coach is
Illinois.
Illinois' old DC. He got
Spicy.
in there this year after Purdue's head coach, what was his? I can't
Brom
think of his
went
name.
to Louisville.
Brom went to Louisville. They brought in Hudson Card. They still have Maccabee, who runs like a weirdo. And I mean, they have some decent teams as long as they can keep kind of focused. I like this team more so than a lot of other guys. And then Illinois, their offensive and defensive lines are nasty. Now they're replacing a quarterback or running back. They're placing obviously I think a safety and Witherspoon, so they're replacing a lot on their secondary and kind of the places where you win. But the Big Ten West isn't about those positions for the most part. It's about who are your defensive linemen? Can you stop the run? And they have two of the best interior defensive linemen in the Big Ten. Bielema always puts them in the right positions to win games, to play games close, almost to his detriment sometimes, where he refuses to run away with games, where he refuses to grow a lead. But I just think that those two teams, and Nebraska's obviously transitioning, I
Yes.
think those teams don't have necessarily a full onset identity, and Illinois and Purdue will and can also, handle that slate with who they're kind of returning, maybe in the defensive and offensive interior. So that's just one of my takes. It's going to come down to them. I mean, Purdue won the Big Ten last year, so I know they lost their head coach, but not necessarily a hot take. In Illinois, could have win with a few, unlucky breaks going the other way down the stretch.
I like it. That's a hot take for sure. So my third take is Big Ten and Michigan kind of combined here. I'll kind of go through a list of it's like three different points. I think Penn State wins the Big Ten. I also think Maryland is the top three for the East, and then Michigan would not be in the top three in the East. So that means Penn State's probably winning it. Ohio State's probably second in the East, and then Maryland's third. And then Michigan maybe has a 9-3, 10-2 season, and there's a weird tiebreaker. We know the Big Ten tiebreakers
Yeah,
are
the tiebreaker rules get so
dumb,
weird.
just straight up dumb. But I think Maryland might be sneaky good, especially with Talia.
Talia.
I think he's been at the
Yeah.
school for about 8 years now, about to get his PhD and whatever, COVID year. But I think he's good. I think Loxley has been there for a good enough time now to have his guys. I've heard their defense should be good this year, so I think Maryland might be able to beat State. They might be able to beat one of the big three guys right now. So if they can beat Michigan or Ohio State, that's going to put a weird curveball in the East. And then I think, like you said before, I think the top three will beat each other. Penn State's going to beat Michigan. Michigan will beat Ohio State will beat one of them. Something crazy is going to happen like that, and I think that'll lead to Michigan bumping down along with Maryland playing up. And Penn State will get a chance, in my opinion, if they win the Big Ten in the CFP against whomever they get drawn up against. I think it's slightly hot just because Maryland would be beating up Michigan, and Michigan would probably be disappointed. That might mean Harbaugh's looking to leave. In your instance, 11-1 is, I guess, a bad year in my opinion. I'd be happy, but obviously high expectations.
Yeah, I mean, finishing outside of the top three, where you don't finish in the top three because of a weird tiebreaker rule,
Yeah.
right? Where Michigan's done that twice, where they've been, tied for the lead in the Big Ten technically, but it's just because of weird tiebreakers where they aren't. If they weren't, that would be an incredibly disappointing year. Just what is your reasoning that you think Michigan would regress, or do you think it's the other teams getting so much significantly better that even though Michigan returns a hell of a ton,
Yeah.
the other teams are just jumped them more so than Michigan falling?
I think some of the stubbornness that you're talking to about not passing in the red zone could haunt them with not an established kicker like Moody. I think that could make them. I think Moody is huge. I mean, he's an NFL kicker. I don't think that's Michigan stepping down, but I think that's Michigan being stubborn and not trusting their quarterback.
Being stuck, not
Stuck.
growing.
Yeah, and
Perfect.
I think JJ is good, but I don't think he's as good as some people might think. But if you want to put the ball in his hands and not kick so many field goals and give it to you have a two-headed monster running back. But I think crazy things can happen in college football. We've all seen it. If one team's just a little bit better that day, they're gonna kick your ass. We've both seen some crazy plays between Michigan and Michigan State with trouble with the snap, and I've seen a couple Hail Marys and Little Giants. So like anything can happen. That's why you play, and I think maybe Michigan has a couple mistakes here and there with being stuck, like you said, wanting to run the ball and not passing with JJ in the red zone, and then maybe Maryland gets a couple bounces their way, and they beat a couple, they have a couple upsets here and there, and then like I said, the big three kind of knock each other down. I don't know if Ohio State is going to be as good as they have been, but maybe one of their quarterbacks is a god out of nowhere and he's really good, and we'll see. But I think Penn State is the best team, and I think low key Drew Aller is really good, better than Sean Clifford, and I think that'll help them win the Big Ten, and then everything else will kind of follow.
Oh, no, I don't mind that take. Obviously, I disagree as a Michigan fan. It's interesting, though, because you have those teams obviously being in the top four. That means State probably doesn't have the year that you're necessarily expecting to. So, like,
Well, 7 and
if that's
5,
the
they're
hot take that
probably
happens,
in the
yeah,
middle of the road.
yeah. But it should be a fun year. And like you said, I mean, teams have been projected to finish a lot better year in and year out. And one injury, 3 bad plays, and you can lose football games. So, um, I like that take. I do think Penn State, I mean, everyone's kind of high on Penn State, not necessarily to win the conference, but they're high on them,
Mm-hmm.
and that's definitely a leap. Um, but let's move on here. Let's get out of the Big Ten country. Let's
Yes,
talk to
sir.
anyone else who's listening. For number 4, I was thinking of the conference as a whole. The ACC doesn't really entertain me that much. I'm not super interested in see how their conference played out. If Notre Dame ever joined that conference and was like the COVID year and could play for a championship, I'd be more interested. But no one can kind of match Clemson's ability. Um, so I immediately went to the SEC. I think that in the SEC West, neither LSU or Bama are going to win the West.
Ooh.
And so I kind of want to qualify this statement because you may be like, oh, well, everyone's high on Texas A&M. There's other good teams in there. So the last 5 years have been decided between these two teams. And then since 2011, there's only been 2 times, right? So since 2011, so coming up on, it's been
12
11
years.
years of college football. There's only been 2 years that Alabama or LSU haven't represented the West, and that was Auburn twice.
Don't say Auburn. No.
Yep,
God,
Auburn
Peyton
twice.
Thorne does no way.
So
Or
I'm not
Eagle.
necessarily saying it's Auburn. It could be Texas A&M. If Jimbo Fisher can figure out their offense, they recruit at a high level. I just honestly, I just want to see something else happen. SEC is some of the best football. I mean, is the best football in the country for the most part. They have the best athletes, the best, most 5 stars, most draft picks, and all that. But it's such a boring conference. Holy Lord!
Now with
I know
Georgia
you can
being
probably say that about
Georgia's,
every.
like
Yeah,
absolutely agree.
I mean, I just think that the conference and like who wins every year has been boring. There's not much flip flopping. I mean, it's been Georgia, Alabama, LSU. I mean, a lot of conferences are like that. Ohio State won it like 6 straight years, but at least the West is entertaining on who's going to come out of it. It's just I want to see someone else come out of it. I think there's a lot of good teams, and can someone just dethrone these two LSU and Alabama teams? And I want to say maybe it's Auburn with Peyton Thorne, our close friend. But Texas A&M has a good chance. Arkansas, I'm pretty high on them if their defense can get figured out. Uh, but just anyone else, please. And then obviously Georgia's probably going to come out of the East, but
Yeah.
it should be interesting to kind of see how that all plays out.
I
All right,
would,
what's your first non-Big Ten hot take?
yeah, I would love to see Ole Miss or Arkansas come out of the West. Honestly,
Yeah.
good take though. I like that. I already bet on this, so this is
Ooh.
this is a couple weeks old take, I guess. Drake May for Heisman. I think obviously you said the ACC is kind of boring. I think North Carolina's offense with Mac Brown coming back the last couple years has been pretty elite. Sam Howell probably starting quarterback in the NFL. He's really good too. And Drake May also threw for like almost 40 plus touchdowns last year as a freshman. Like you said, the ACC is kind of boring, but he puts up numbers. They run the ball.
I think he was a sophomore,
I think
right?
he's a
He's
sophomore now.
eligible.
Or is it
No, I
COVID
think
messing
he's
me up?
Yeah, I think he's eligible for the draft this year, which they're saying him and Caleb Williams are probably 1 and 2 for the draft.
Well, I thought he
Sorry, I didn't want to stop you in the middle of your hot take, but I just wanted to make sure. There's
was
probably
class
people.
on ESPN says sophomore. but maybe he's still eligible because of COVID.
Yeah.
But last year, 4,300 yards, 38 tutties, 7 touchdowns. That's pretty damn good for a freshman or whatever COVID freshman. Um, I think he's gonna light it up. He's pretty solid quarterback, bigger guy, and in that offense, it seems like North Carolina loves to just throw the ball around. He wasn't. He's like in the middle of the road favorite, so I thought it was good money in my opinion. I think probably Caleb Williams is the favorite, but I think Drake May and North Carolina, they're pretty consistent 8-9 win team. Maybe they get 10 or 11. Maybe they beat Clemson in the championship, or if they're in the same side. I don't know the ACC that well, but I think that's a
There's
pretty.
no size in the ACC.
No, then what if they play in the regular season or the championship now? I think it'd be fun to see him win it. I've already put like 10 or 20 bucks on the bet. He's in the middle of the road. Obviously, it's a quarterback award now, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's
Running backs can't win it. I mean, obviously the receiver won it 1 year. I have three opinions on this. So one, they might suck. So he
yeah,
might put up Heisman level yards. So he might be right in like his yardage, but their defense is bad. They didn't get better from last year, and they were bad. Their skill positions offensively got worse. So he might put up a ton of yards, but it might not be it. And then also offensively, they lost their offensive coordinator too. I know it's Mac Brown and kind of his show, but
yes,
it's also like losing a full offensive coordinator is tough.
that's big still. Yeah,
And then, but the one upside is that if they can pull out some close games, he might have to throw the ball 55 times.
absolutely.
Like he might have to will his team to victory every single week, and then it becomes a story. We know the Heisman is more so about storytelling than it is about whether someone should win the Heisman or not.
Yeah,
We
storytelling
know it.
and like, did this guy make his team win more games? Like, if Texas A&M
Yeah,
didn't have Johnny Manziel, they wouldn't have won. Whatever, they went 9-4 that year or whatever.
yeah, and so that's kind of what it can come down to. So I don't dislike that take, but I think that's less likely than maybe some other Heisman winners that
It's
you
a
could have
hot take.
mentioned. Like Quint Ewers would have been almost a hot take, but has more possibility almost. It's like the same level of hotness because it's basically Caleb Williams award, but it should be interesting to see. I mean, the ACC is going to have fun offenses, but I
Yeah.
just think Clemson's probably going to run away with it if they can. They have the O coordinator from TCU who calls great games. They have 5 stars everywhere. I mean, I think they're going to be cruising. But that I do like the take, but I just see some maybe some
There's little
problems
cracks in
with
there,
it
but
coming out. And I hope your bet hits. That'd be
that'd
awesome.
be pretty sick. I put it in like 2 or 3 weeks ago, along with the
So
over for State and the over for Penn State. Just if anybody wants to throw that out there and sprinkle it.
I love it. So my last hot take and what we're gonna kind of close my side with is on the same notion of storytelling. How beautiful would this be if Oregon State wins the
Dude,
Pac-12?
that's mine.
Is that yours?
Oregon
No,
State.
it's
I have
not.
Oregon State dark
Oh my
horse.
God,
Let's
Oregon
go.
State. Yeah,
Go
that's
ahead.
funny. So we can kind of talk about this together. That'll make it a lot more fun.
That's awesome.
But
Mind
I
blowing. We
think
didn't plan
I mean
that.
they were yeah, we did not plan that. Oregon State, I think they're a lot. They remind me more of Utah, which has been incredibly successful in how they've built a brand and identity of toughness out in the Pac-12, more so than USC. If DJ Uyunglele can figure it out, if he can ride that horse, if he can conquer those demons that he was battling at Clemson. And just to say this, I watched probably 4 or 5 games of DJ Uyunglele because it wasn't for the specific hot take, but I'm just a fiend and it's college football season's almost up. And I was like, did he actually get a chance? And I watched their game against Notre Dame. And his first 8 or 9 passes were screens.
Can't get in a rhythm.
Like RPO and screens, like RPO handoff, or more like read option handoff and then screens. Like this man has a nuclear weapon strapped to his right arm, and they're like, "Can you play offense in a 8 by 10 or 9 yard, 6 yard box?" Like that's not really his strength. They're asking him to do stuff. They wanted him to run a lot. I mean, he can run, but he's not a runner
Yeah.
where Trevor Lawrence more had that ability. And I think that if you get him in a heavy play action offense, if you get him in a pro style where he doesn't have to make quick reads through an RPO system, and they're going to be able to rely on their defense, they're going to be able to rely on their special teams, O line, run game. I like what Oregon State's built out there, and this is the last year of the Pac-12, and it would be just like in the fashion that USC is a powerhouse, UCLA, people are decently high on them, all these teams are leaving, and one of the four teams that are stuck and aren't going to make it out, maybe not even make it into a conference, if they could win it in the last year and just tell everyone like, hey, this is a big fu for screwing us out of all this money. I just think that'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I love that. That's absolutely great stuff. I've heard some rumblings that their O and D line are pretty solid and like older, mature. So that's kind of why I took them. And kind of like what you said, like they're getting screwed. I think DJ. I think he's a good quarterback. He was on QB1, and he's a big dude. He's got a big arm. Can he run? Yes, but I don't think they were using him, to the best ability. And the guys from Hawaii, in my opinion, I'm a homebody. I couldn't imagine going from Cali all the way over to South Carolina. It's college football and they make you feel at home. But I think, there's a lot of things that
Not
can.
when you're losing though.
Yeah, exactly. And people are like, college football fans probably are crazy in the South, and Clemson's on the SEC, but probably the same kind of fans get a little nuts. I mean, I can get a little nuts. So, and I've heard it's amplified down there. So maybe a change of scenery is good for him. Maybe Oregon State's got a little bit, good talent sprinkled around him where you can, throw some deep balls. Hopefully they have a couple of good warm-up games. I would love to see a nice Civil War. Well, they don't call that anymore between Oregon and them. Like down to a nice tight game and he like clutches it up somehow. That'd be sick. But I think just everything in the Pac-12 happening, I think it'd be really cool to see one of those teams, like you said, to do it. And I think Oregon State has the best weapons and a decent quarterback to do it. And I'm kind of curious to see where all those teams go. Are they going to the Mountain West? Are they going, somewhere else? I really don't know.
Yeah.
It hasn't been announced, right?
I know Cal is basically boned unless they get in a mega conference because they owe like the most. They're the most in debt of any college football program, and they obviously don't make the money. Like the other ones up there are like Texas, Michigan, because you can have outstanding debt when you bring in, 200 million or whatever or 200 billion in revenue or whatever they bring in. And so I'm just looking at kind of what makes those teams viable, and none of it looks well for like there's just media markets and TV deals, and in all of it's kind of gross. We already changed the game. It didn't even slow down the games without having first down. That rule is just the stupidest thing.
I think I
Um,
saw 3 or 4 minutes shaved, and the time played was still the same. Like
yeah,
three or four
because
plays.
more
Sorry,
commercial.
3 or 4 plays, and then the time played was like 3 minutes shorter. So pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, it's just sick kind of what some of those people are doing to the game. Now the game's gonna survive, it's awesome, but it just sucks. And Oregon State, I want them to win it. Maybe that propels them. Maybe they go to the conference football playoff, and then a conference is like, hell, we have to take them now. But it should be fun. One of the other hot takes that I was kind of thinking about and kind of uh, it really hasn't left my mind. I know we only had five, but if you don't mind, I
Throw in
kind of want to
one.
bring this
Fuck it.
up. I think FSU might be the most overrated
I
team in
saw
the
your
country
tweet. I
right
saw
now.
your tweet this week about. Was that Kirk that said something weird?
Yeah, it was just like when you look at FSU and who they went on a win streak down the line of the season. They were not playing good teams. They had to be either to get to the ACC championship game last year. They had to be Wake and NC State, and they lost both. And like those are not that good of teams. Like they were not kind of teams where you're like, wow. And they went on a winning streak when their season was over from like a national power perspective against the worst teams in the ACC and then Florida. And even against Florida, they played a close game. And so I mean I know teams are like, well, look at all the positives, but it's like also look at who they are. Like I don't know if they're gonna like they should have lost the game to LSU last year. Their kicker missed like a 26-yarder, so they're lucky that they even won that game.
Yes.
And then you have a bunch of close games down the stretch. They lose those games. I could expect them. They play LSU, game, Clemson. They could start the season 2-2 this year, and that could completely derail a team that has national title, college football playoff expectations, where they could lose 3, 4 games depending on how the ACC kind of stacks up, and I mean that would be I didn't really want to say it because is that a necessarily hot take? I've seen it other places, some people talking about it, but I just don't know necessarily the fundamental point of all of the hype. Now, I know they have good players, but you have to win before you win, if that makes sense. Like before I give you the credence, and beating the bottom of the ACC doesn't really do that. I don't think they played one team or two teams that were 500 down the stretch in their final 6 wins.
I think it's a good take. I think they probably are overrated. I mean, like you said, the AP poll was kind of booty cheeks. But I mean, they're a good quarterback, relatively decent quarterback coming back. They're getting a transfer with Keon Coleman, who's pretty respected receiver, and they're probably returning a bunch of other guys. So I
Yeah, their
mean,
D line's going to be pretty good. So I mean,
yeah,
I just can see that if you lose to LSU close and lose to Clemson close, you're like, we can't win anything, and
spiral.
then it spirals, and where
See ya.
they have because they have a really tough start to the season. They don't have any time to loosen up. They don't have any time to get accustomed to their college football season. It's LSU, which is a top 10 team, cupcake, out of conference games, and then Clemson, and it's like if you aren't put together, that could be a horrible season waiting for you.
Absolutely, I agree. I don't have another hot take, but I had a thing that was in my mind from when we were talking about the Pac-12 being network being stupid. This can be our last little talking segment, and we can be done. Um, what was the first domino to fall to fuck up all the media stuff and have the Pac-12 disintegrate? What, in your opinion? I have an answer in my head. What would your opinion be the beginning, like the first domino to fall with
That
this
led to the Pac-12.
to led to this whole media thing and the Big Ten expanding and all this stuff? I have an easy answer in my head. I kind of wanted to see what your thoughts might be. This could be 2 or 3 years ago. Does have to be
I
like
mean,
what just
well,
happened.
I think it's a multitude of things. So, I mean, you have to go kind of back to what happened to the Pac-12 and the ACC. I kind of group these together is they signed deals that were not grow their program. They're not helping their program, which is why the major teams in their conferences are looking to leave. So there's partially that. But when Texas and OU left the Big 12,
Yep.
it created a power vacuum where both times that there's been huge conference expansion, it's been led by the SEC. The SEC creates a power vacuum in a conference. The Big Ten or ACC has to respond to have that amount of market share, the amount of revenue, that amount of marquee games, and then the other conferences that don't have as much money, get poached.
Yeah.
And that happened with OU and Texas. Michigan had to go get two nationally identifiable brands that are
Big
strong
Ten.
in
Big Ten. You said
or
Michigan.
the Big Ten, yeah, yeah. Had to get two nationally identified brands, and that led to them.
Yep.
And then, you know, at one point, the Pac-12 could have gone after the Big 12 and taken those guys
I was
away
looking
and
at
joined a
stuff
mega
on
conference too.
Facebook. I was talking about the Pac-12 taking people from the Big 12. That was
Mhm.
when I was a senior or a freshman in
And the,
college, so it almost happened.
yeah, and the USC said no, let's not do that, and then they left.
That's
So I
nuts.
mean, it's the college admins, the people that look at college sports and everything from a balance sheet perspective, which is important because without the money, you can't do any of the other sports. But they don't care because they want their brand to be, oh, I brought in $40 million because they've been sitting on a CEO chair of a company instead of being like, oh, I actually give a crap about this university. I give a crap about all this stuff. And so, yeah, I would say obviously the SEC stealing led to the Big Ten stealing,
Yeah.
led to the Big 12 stealing other members, and then led to more stealing, and obviously it's just been a mess. So what do you think?
The first domino to fall to make this all happen was Texas making their own network. Longhorn Network was
Oh
the
yeah,
beginning.
yeah,
Longhorn Network was the beginning of everything, in my opinion. I don't even know what year that started. Probably 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there. And because of that, you got the ACC Network, you got the Pac-12 Network. Big Ten has been around
Big
for a
Ten.
while, but I think the Longhorn Network, when Texas is such a big brand, they can make their own network, and you got to pay for it. But it just made it shit way more complicated, like
Well,
Peacock and shit. Like that's where streaming and weird shit with money revenue, in my opinion,
yeah,
started
that's how the
with all this
Pac-12
shit.
killed themselves.
Yeah,
They started the
absolutely.
Pac-12 network and said, "Oh well, it worked for the Big Ten network, and we'll get people to pay an extra $10." And it's like people out west have things to do.
The games are
Much
done.
different.
I mean,
Yeah,
Sunday night football is
everyone in
done
the
at
east,
6:30,
everyone in the east
7:30.
is done. Everyone in the east has gone to sleep, brought their kids home. They went out tailgating all day. They're not gonna go home and watch it. And
No,
everyone out west, like it's L.A., it's San Diego, it's Phoenix. Like no
Seattle,
one that
big cities.
Seattle. You have things to do. It's
Yeah,
not 20 degrees out. It's 75 and beautiful. You can go to the beach. You can go get drunk at a bar. Like no one is obsessed as much with sports.
big
And
Midwest
living
folk.
out in Phoenix, I can speak to. It's the Midwest and the South. I mean, those two groups of people care about college sports.
Yeah.
Like you come to Phoenix and people love the Cardinals if they're good and love the Diamondbacks if they're good, and they follow sports, but for the most part they don't give a crap about ASU football. They're not talking about it in the background. I mean, maybe a little bit, but they're not it's not every single moment. It's not their livelihoods. They don't start podcasts about it as much as like people from the north and the Midwest and the South do. It's just not in their blood.
Yeah. But I think Longhorn Network kind of led to everything that you had spoke about with the SEC kind of taking what was it, Texas A&M and Missouri, was that the first one?
A&M, Missouri, and then Nebraska joined, and Colorado left
Yeah.
the
And then we got like
Pac-12,
Rutgers
and
and
then
Maryland.
Maryland and Rutgers left the
Big East.
Big East,
Rip.
and then yep, and I mean obviously Big East rip for every sport that isn't
Yeah.
football, or for that is every sport other than football. But it's kind of crazy how all this kind of come down, and I mean follow the money. That's where it leads, and
It's gonna be.
Texas was
Do you
like,
think
I'm
it'll
not
be
getting rid
just
of it.
a free for all in the next 5 years or 10 years or what?
I mean, I could honestly see the college football breaking away from the NCAA as a governing body. The colleges coming together, because the NCAA is partially like the colleges come together and say it, but like the football players are going to get paid money. They're going to turn it. You ask the NFL, hey, you're the most profitable league in all of sports. Sponsor us. Use your networks. Use your TV deals. Talk with ESPN. Now we'll add more money instead of just Fox. You'll see NFL games on ESPN, and maybe you can see more than 2 games a goddamn weekend, unless you buy a $600 pass. But you can literally envision it coming down, and it's going to be a semi-pro sports league. They'll still attend college, maybe. Maybe it just becomes its own brand where Michigan, they're not the University of Michigan. They're just Michigan Wolverines as their own separate brand that pays money to the university to fund their other athletic departments. I mean, it's unidentifiable where it could go,
Yeah.
but I mean, as long as people are playing football and people are smashing heads and we don't make it into the NFL, it should be awesome.
Yeah, definitely an interesting take. I kind of hope we kind of take a step back in the next 5 or 10 years and kind of go back to more geography. But obviously, I don't know if that's money. Probably not. But that's just me being.
I'd love for that too, Quist.
Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna
It's
happen.
just when it comes down to, and I'm not like some financial expert. I don't work in finance, but it's just nothing ever goes backwards.
True.
Your taxes never go down. The bills never go down.
That's true.
The money never goes down. It always goes up, right? And constant improvement. Because you can't make any of these leagues smaller now, unless they sign a new media rights deal that shrinks them.
True.
But a lot of these deals run until like 2040. So I mean, maybe it's something then. But what you're most likely going to see if the shrinking does happen is teams like Rutgers, Vanderbilt, Northwestern are just kicked out of the conferences and said, go figure it out. And hey, we're now having an even stronger, better product with less bullshit games, with less teams that suck. Can you please pay us more money?
Yeah.
I mean, the conferences, if they shrink, they're going to not shrink geographically, they're going to shrink financially. Having the weakest financial members leave the conference. They're going to just kick out the people that, because for Michigan, they're losing revenue technically, right? If you think about it, to teams like Rutgers, because Rutgers doesn't generate the revenue that Michigan does.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Michigan generates, Ohio State generates, Penn State, Iowa, they generate boatloads of revenue, and then they put it in a pool, split it evenly, right? Which is the only way to make it fair, but it's difficult to talk about fair when you're talking about business, and that's what it's turned into. It's not like, oh, well, we want conference health. No one gives a shit about Rutgers from Michigan. No one cares about New Jersey. They brought them in so the New Jersey market could be entered both recruiting and through television.
Yeah.
And while they're not financially able, they're gone. Northwestern's only in there because they've been in there for freaking forever. They have all these allegations. They're going to be 0 and whatever. They haven't won a Big Ten. I mean, they won two, but they're not relevant from a fan perspective. They're not relevant from a fan base perspective
Yeah, no.
nationally. They're gone. I mean, you could even see, Maryland could be close to getting the boot. I mean, it's interesting to kind of see how all of it works out financially. But you look at the SEC, like Vanderbilt, they have a 0% chance of living if the conference ever shrinks.
Yeah. It's definitely hard to talk about because I love college football. I love the pageantry and the traditional, all that stuff. And it'll be interesting to see where things go in the next 5 or 10 years, especially with
Yeah,
the playoff. I mean, I don't mind the D2 setup. I mean, Grand Valley is really good. They're right down the road. Ferris is up the road. They're both dominant. They play, I think, 9 or 10 regular season games, and they jump in the
yeah.
playoffs. The GLIAC is like the SEC of D2. So I don't know why. Obviously, there's more money in FBS D1.
It's
Obviously,
just money, Dave.
money talks and bowl
Just the
games
money.
and all that shit in the contract. So I don't know if we can make bowl games play in the playoff and all that shit. I think it could be done, but that's another conversation. I think I
Yeah,
don't.
that's something we can definitely follow up with one of these other weeks if we want to talk about
Yeah.
bowl games and how other divisions do it. But the last thing that I'll kind of also end on is you ever heard about like the crab theory?
No, go
Where
ahead.
so for evolutionary perspective, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's lobsters, but I'm like 99% sure it's crabs. But it's all of these different species end up evolving into basically a crab because it's financially viable, or not financially, but
Oh,
evolutionary viable for
right.
them to evolve into something that like this because it survives in those areas so efficiently and so well. And it's all these other patterns that come from all these different lineages that all end up kind of having the same look. And that's what happens with things. You look at Fortnite busting into the gaming scene. Now every single gaming has a
Battle
battle
Royale.
pass, has live service,
Yep.
has this because they're like, hey, that's successful. We need to all do that. The NFL controls the money, controls the player. There's way more control than they have right now than in college, where college is a student athlete. You think the people who are making $1 billion on student athletes give a shit if they're a student athlete? No, that's just the requirement legally right now. As soon as they can make that illegal and say, hey, you don't actually have to be a student athlete, you can just come here and play football, they're going to do it as quickly as they can. And that's what you're kind of seeing eroding is it's just going to come professional football. And there's going to be two leagues and less teams, so all the money's concentrated so you can build fortresses and then the same thing happens like it always does. It either keeps adapting or keeps dying and maybe that's what everything is. We just keep adapting and killing ourselves and move forward to push forward to create something bigger and then it's just doesn't even matter because it's less fun in the end. We
Yeah,
get so
definitely
lost in
less fun.
growing. We get
There
so
would be
lost in
no App
growing that
State.
we're
There'd
not
be no
looking
App
at the
State,
good.
Michigan. There'd be no
Yep,
Central beating State. There'd be no FCS
no
beating
fun.
no FCS beating FBS, which is always will happen this year. It's always great to see that. So yeah, I don't like what you're saying. I hope it doesn't happen to that extreme, but
Yeah,
I understand what you're saying. I just don't like it. Um,
me as well,
should
David.
be interesting to see, like I said, the next 5 or 10 years. But I'm excited for the week. Is there anything else you want to say before we kind of close it out?
Nope. Thursday we're gonna do a preview of Week One, Michigan State, and some of the other marquee games.
Probably have
Does
the
suck that
Utah Florida game on my TV when we're talking.
it does suck. The only thing is that there's no ranked matchups on Saturday. There's no ranked matchups the first day, which does suck. Obviously, there's great games that are gonna be on, but that does suck. But I'm super excited for everything. I am going on my honeymoon this weekend, so it might be tough to watch all of the games.
Yeah.
But we're gonna try our best. And Monday is obviously Labor Day, so we'll either get the podcast probably up Sunday or Monday to follow up after week one.
Do a little
Maybe Monday.
review and yeah, do it. We
Yep.
can just chill during the day. But thanks as always, KB. Everybody, I'm gonna say go green.
Oh, go blue, baby! You guys have a good one.
All right, talk to you later, KB.
See ya. Bye.